You can walk through Ybor City today, grab dinner, hear live music, never realize that those same streets once sat at the center of Tampa's organized crime world. You can drive past apartment buildings and schools without knowing that hundreds of people were buried beneath the surrounding land. Then there are the stories involving pirate treasure, bodies supposedly trapped inside the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, and tunnels running beneath Ybor City. Some of Tampa's darkest stories are supported by historical records, while others contain one piece of truth surrounded by decades of exaggeration. And after living here, working here, and helping people relocate to Tampa for years, I thought I knew the city pretty well, but a few of these stories completely surprised me. Today I'm separating the documented history from the local folklore and digging into the events that shaped Tampa long before waterfront condos, rooftop restaurants, and luxury homes entered the picture. Let's begin with the history that most people associate with New York or Chicago, but rarely Tampa. When most people hear the word mafia, they immediately picture New York, Chicago, or Las Vegas. Tampa usually does not make the list, but for several decades, probably should have. Organized crime had deep roots here in Tampa, particularly around Ybor City and West Tampa. One of the earliest major figures was Charlie Wall, who became known as a powerful gambling boss during the first half of the 20th century. Santo Trafficante Sr. later emerged as another major figure, and his son eventually became one of the country's most influential organized crime bosses. Their operations extended far beyond a few private card games, though. An illegal lottery called Bolita became extremely popular in Tampa's immigrant communities, and it generated enormous amounts of money. But that wasn't all. Organized crime figures were also connected with bootlegging, illegal gambling establishments, prostitution, extortion, and loan sharking. And when that much illegal money moves through a city, influence usually follows it. Police officers, judges, politicians, and other public officials faced allegations that they accepted bribes or protected gambling operations. Now, it would be irresponsible to treat every accusation as proven, but Tampa's relationship with organized crime was not merely a rumor whispered around Ybor, and the connections extended beyond Florida. Tampa's relationship with Cuba is usually discussed through cigar manufacturing, immigration, food, and culture, but organized crime was another part of that history. Santo Trafficante Jr. developed interests and connections in Havana, where American organized crime figures invested heavily in casinos before Fidel Castro came to power. But when Castro took control in 1959 and closed the casinos, that world changed almost overnight. The Tampa underworld being connected to political events taking place hundreds of miles away, not something I expected when I first started learning about this history. But what may be even more surprising is that many Tampa residents knew who the major players were. But knowing something and proving it in court are two completely different things. In 1950, the Kefauver Committee brought its national investigation into organized crime to Tampa. Charlie Wall testified about the city's gambling world, and the hearings brought national attention to the relationship between crime, business, and government. Today, Ybor City looks completely different. You see historic brick streets, cigar shops, restaurants, coffee houses, and people out enjoying the neighborhood. But once you know the history, it makes it a little more difficult to look at those old buildings without wondering what happened behind their walls. But the influence did not remain inside back rooms and gambling halls. It also reached Tampa's elections. During the first half of the 20th century, Tampa developed a reputation for political corruption and election misconduct. Historical accounts include allegations of ballot box tampering, voter intimidation, purchased votes, and public officials protecting illegal gambling interests. Bolita played a major role, and the lottery produced so much money that the people benefiting from it had a strong incentive to influence who held local office. Friendly officials could protect gambling operations, interfere with investigations, or simply look the other way. That does not mean that every Tampa politician was corrupt or every election was fraudulent, but it does mean that the accusations were serious, repeated, and supported by enough documented incidents to damage the city's reputation. In one notorious 1928 incident, gunmen attempted to steal a ballot box and shot election workers in the process. Investigations, prosecutions, political reforms, and growing federal scrutiny eventually weakened that system. The Tampa people know today operates in a completely different world, but the city did not arrive there automatically. Public pressure and criminal investigations forced long-standing problems out into the open. Political influence was only part of the struggle. As rival criminal groups competed for money and control, Tampa entered a period that newspapers would later describe as the era of blood. By the 1930s, Tampa's criminal underworld had become increasingly violent, and rival groups competed over bolita, bootlegging, gambling operations, territory, and political influence. But these disagreements did not end with attorneys shaking hands across a conference table. Shootings and murders made headlines, while many cases remained unsolved because witnesses were afraid, evidence was difficult to obtain, and powerful people had reasons to remain silent. Charlie Wall sat at the center of much of that history. He survived several attempts on his life as competing groups fought for control of Tampa's illegal gambling economy, but in 1955, someone finally reached him and Wall was murdered inside his Ybor City home. Despite the theories surrounding who ordered the killing and why, no one was ever convicted, and while his death became one of Tampa's most notorious unsolved murders, it was not the only one. Other killings connected with Tampa's organized crime era also went unsolved. The people involved may have known exactly what happened, but the official answers disappeared with them. Nearly a century later, historians can reconstruct relationships, rivalries, and probable motives, but certainty remains much harder to find. Now, before we leave Tampa's criminal history, I want to mention something for anyone researching a move here. Understanding Tampa means looking beyond property listings. The communities around the city have different histories, lifestyles, commute patterns, and personalities. I created a free Tampa relocation guide to help you organize that research, and you can find it through the link below. The next chapter is not a crime story, although what happened raises its own difficult questions. It concerns people whose burial places were erased from maps and eventually built over. Zion Cemetery was established in 1901 as Tampa's first African-American burial ground. During segregation, Black families had very limited options for burying their loved ones, and Zion became the final resting place for hundreds of Tampa residents. The cemetery closed around 1920, and as decades passed, the land changed ownership. Buildings, businesses, and part of Robles Park Village housing complex were eventually constructed over portions of the former cemetery, and this location faded from public memory. Later, researchers combined historical records with ground-penetrating radar and found evidence connected with more than 800 burials. Just stop and consider what that means. Families lived in apartments, drove through nearby streets, and went about their normal routines without being told that a major African-American burial ground had once occupied the property. Fortunately, the discovery encouraged researchers to investigate other forgotten cemeteries. At King High School, ground-penetrating radar identified 145 graves associated with Ridgewood Cemetery, which was another African-American burial ground that had largely disappeared from public awareness. Zion and Ridgewood are separate cemeteries, but both demonstrate how easily history can be erased when records are ignored and communities lack the power to protect sacred ground. Going across the bay into St. Petersburg, researchers have also investigated land once occupied by Oak Lawn Cemetery near Trafficante Field, where radar surveys identified possible graves and other underground anomalies beneath the parking area. As of 2026, officials were moving forward with physical investigation to determine whether those anomalies are actual burial sites, and that distinction really matters. Radar can identify shapes consistent with graves, but confirmation requires further archaeological work. Efforts are now underway to honor the people buried at these sites through historical markers, memorial spaces, genealogy research, preservation work, and talking with living family members of those buried here. A historical marker honoring Zion Cemetery was dedicated in 2025, and plans connected with the redevelopment of Robles Park also include a cemetery memorial and genealogy center. This part of Tampa's history deserves a different tone from the Mafia stories or local legends, but just as much, if not more, attention. These were real people whose names, families, and resting places were neglected. Remembering them is not about making Tampa appear darker or more mysterious. It's about restoring a history that should have never disappeared. By the 1980s, Tampa looked much more familiar. The city was growing, development was accelerating, and the skyline was beginning to change. But political corruption had not completely disappeared. In the early 1980s, federal investigations began examining allegations of corruption involving the Hillsborough County Commission. The accusations involved commissioners accepting bribes or improper payments connected with zoning decisions, contracts, licenses, and other county business. The investigation expanded, and 3 of the 5 sitting Hillsborough County commissioners eventually went to prison following federal corruption cases. The scandal damaged public trust and forced the county to confront serious ethical problems. It also led to stronger scrutiny and reforms intended to make local government more transparent. One pattern keeps appearing throughout Tampa's history. Problems remained hidden until investigators, journalists, residents, or historians refused to let them stay hidden. That brings us to the stories where the evidence becomes much less certain. Every established city develops folklore, and Tampa definitely has its fair share. We have pirates, buried treasure, bodies inside bridges, and underground tunnels. But let's separate what we know from what people simply enjoy repeating. Jose Gaspar is the pirate most closely associated with Tampa Bay, but there is one major problem. Historians have found very little evidence that he ever existed. The story appears to have gained attention through an early 20th century promotion ad brochure connected with the Gasparilla Inn. From there, the legend grew into the pirate mythology Tampa celebrates every year. But that has never stopped people from searching for treasure. Stories claim Gaspar or other pirates buried valuables somewhere along Florida's Gulf Coast. Some people believe the treasure remains hidden, while others insist it was discovered and quietly removed years ago. There is no verified treasure and very little reliable evidence connecting Jose Gaspar with Tampa Bay, but still I understand why the story survives. Living near the water becomes slightly more interesting when every undeveloped patch of land could theoretically be hiding pirate gold. But I certainly do not recommend building your retirement plan around finding it. Now, this next one is one of Tampa Bay's creepiest construction legends. The original Sunshine Skyway partially collapsed in 1980 after the freighter Summit Venture struck a bridge supporting during a severe storm, and 35 people were tragically killed. The current bridge was constructed afterward, and according to the legend, workers building the replacement bridge fell into enormous concrete support columns. Recovering them was supposedly too difficult or expensive, so construction continued with their bodies still inside. There is no credible evidence supporting that story, and similar rumors exist about the Golden Gate Bridge, Hoover Dam, and other major construction projects. Large structures seem to attract the same type of legend because people look at the scale and imagine what could have disappeared during construction. The real 1980 Skyway disaster was already tragic enough, and the claim about the workers being sealed inside the replacement bridge belongs in the folklore category unless legitimate documentation emerges. Our final story is more complicated because the basic claim is actually true. There really are underground passages beneath parts of Ybor City. For years, people talked about tunnels beneath Ybor City as if they were Tampa's version of an urban myth. Then researchers and construction crews documented underground passageways. The mystery is not whether every underground space is imaginary. The real questions involve how many tunnels exist, where they lead, and why they were built in the first place. Theories include primitive sewer systems, water infrastructure, routes used to transport money, and passages connected with smuggling alcohol during Prohibition. Some people insist the Mafia used them. Others claim the tunnels connected businesses throughout Ybor or extended all the way toward the port, but those larger claims have not been proven. Researchers have explored and mapped portions of the underground structures, but they have not confirmed a massive organized crime network stretching beneath the entire neighborhood. This is my favorite Tampa legend because there is enough physical evidence to keep the mystery alive. The tunnels exist, but their complete story does not. That gap between fact and explanation is where local folklore usually becomes impossible to kill. The longer I live and work in Tampa, the more I realize how little of the city's history appears on the surface. Tampa is known for sunshine, waterfront living, Cuban food, Gasparilla, sports, and palm trees. But beneath that version is a much older city shaped by immigration, organized crime, political corruption, violence, forgotten communities, and stories people still debate today. Which one surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments and tell me which piece of Tampa history or local folklore deserves its own video. Subscribe for more honest videos about Tampa, its neighborhoods, and what living here actually feels like. And when you're ready to plan your move, the free relocation guide and the link to schedule a one-on-one call are both in the description below.